Hello there, welcome to Stepping Up, a program which provides a platform for discourse on national issues that affect us as a people. On this edition of the program, we will focus on the importance of the interface between the executive and legislative arms of government as a way of evolving the dividends of democracy to the people. No doubt these arms of government, including the judiciary, enjoy the principle of separation of powers, but in the interest of the people, they must work together for the uplift of the society. Since all the arms are working towards the advancement of the society, there must be an interface among them, and for proper interface, there must be a go in between the arms to evolve a symbiotic relationship. Now, what are the advantages of the interface between the executive and legislative arms of government? This and more are some of the questions that my guest will be providing answers to. Stepping Up is hosting the face of the executive in the legislative arm of government, and he's equally the face of the legislature in the executive. You'll get to meet him after this time out. I am Sarah Sander. Please stay.
Born on 23rd August 1962, Ita Enang is a senior special assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on National Assembly matters. He attended the Presbyterian Teachers Training College, Akwa Ibom State, South Nigeria, from 1974 to 1979. He gained admission to the University of Calabar in 1980 to read law and graduated in 1984. He was later elected to the House of Representatives in 1999, where he served 3 terms as a member of the House of Representatives. Enang worked towards the abolition of the onshore-offshore dichotomy and ensured that his state became the highest earner of all revenue in Nigeria. In 2011, Enang ran and won the senatorial seat of Uyo Northeast and later appointed Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on National Assembly matters on 27th August 2015.
Thanks for staying with us. We're reaching you from the office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly matters. In charge of the Senate, Senator Ita Enang. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much and welcome.
Now, as a former parliamentarian, what is the relationship? How do you assess the relationship between the executive arm of government and the legislature from 1999 and this current 8th Assembly?
Well, the relationship has been defined mostly by the perception of the public and sometimes by the concept of the administration. The relationship under President Obasanjo was different. The relationship under President Yaradua was a lot different, and the relationship under Jonathan was different, and the relationship also under President Muhammadu Buhari is also different. Sometimes at this time it is more different because of the character of the composition of the legislative leadership, and different in the sense that the political party differences, but in terms of the actual performance of the work of the legislature and the challenges that are inherent in the relationship, the challenge of the functions of the executive as that of different from that of the legislature, and the challenge of the legislature trying to assert itself to maintain its independence. It doesn't assert to maintain it because the independence had been gained in 2003, since 2003. So the nature of the relationship is good, very good.
Okay, now the legislature by law is required to perform oversight functions for checks and balances on the executive arm. How well would you say this has been done?
Well, it's been done very well under previous administrations and under the current administrations. But I believe that in our time, because I served here in the House of Representatives and the Senate, I think there were certain failures. I say that there were certain failures because much of what we are hearing today about fraud, certain misappropriation of funds by officers of the executive for defense funds, for political party purposes, and funds in the parastatals, funds in the agencies, and so on. I think it may have been due to failure on our part as a legislature, because if we had been performing our oversight functions well, you would have seen where you had appropriated funds. You would have gone in the course of oversight to see whether that fund was applied for that purpose. And if it were not applied, you would have seen and reported, either in the course of your debate on the floor, or in the course of what we normally call sessional reports of each of the committees, or even in the audit of public accounts. It's unfortunate that all that has been said to happen now, from Office of the National Security Advisor, Office of the all agencies, the different armed services, the different parastatals ministries, there were standing committees. There was the Public Accounts Committee. There was also the public account committees of the Senate and House, and there was also the Public Accounts Office, the Auditor General's Office. These were not reported on. And so, to that extent, there may have been some lag, or what I would call failure, on the parts of oversight or proper oversight.
When you say proper oversight, so what will be done now?
What the present legislature is doing is to get more thorough on the oversight. Like the Senate, they compulsorily allocate 1 week to each committee of the Senate to go on oversight over the ministries, over the respective executive departments under their committee jurisdiction.
But this has always been done.
It had always been, no. It was a situation where each of the committees arranged with their parastatals or agency or ministry when they are coming. This other one is scheduled by the Senate itself that you have to go. And some of it, as it was, if you like, there was a way it was done with some level of laxity, and I think I would want to say more.
How does it benefit the people when there is a symbiotic relationship with the executive arm of government?
Well, the people benefit. But I have always maintained that when the executive and the legislature are arms in gloves, are in love with each other, the people should be worried.
Why?
Because there is capable of being a collusion against the people. The executive is supposed to execute the laws made by the legislature and assented to by the executive. The legislature is expected to make the laws. It is often in the interest of the public, of the masses, for there to be a disagreement between the executive and the legislature. But the heat of, you've not done this well, you've not done this well, I approve this in the law, you have not done. Oh, and they say, this law you did not make. And yes, you made the law, but what is provided in the law for you to do as a legislature, you have not done. You have not done what is contained in the Constitution. That is when the people benefit. Okay. So it is in the interest of the people that the executive and the legislature should not be so much in harmony, but they should work with certain level of understanding. There are different arms of government. They should work with the level of harmony, but an over harmonious situation may endanger the interest of the people. Unfortunately, I am saying this as a liaison officer, but I've had great experience, even in other legislatures. So it is, what is happening is a check, a great check. The executive is conscious that there will be harassed by the executive, the legislature. The legislature is also conscious that the executive will raise alarm, and the people may also. So in all this, it is the people that benefits.
So what kind of relationship are we seeing now? Is it the one you're talking about?
This is a relationship where the people know how much was appropriated, how much is being used, on what it is being used, and asking questions, because everybody can't sit here. And some of these questions are sometimes misinterpreted by the people to be that there is the interests of the people are being jeopardized. No, it is actually in the interest of the people. Except, for instance, there has been some level of assumption that there is heat between the executive and the legislature in this government. And there are certain matters that arise, where the executive seek the implementation of certain laws. And sometimes the public misunderstand it to be that the executive is oppressing the legislature. But I want the people to accept that not many of these laws that are being implemented now are or were made by the present government. They were made by previous administrations and previous legislatures. But then it has become the laws of Nigeria, which are now the laws made by this present parliament. The same thing happens on the part of the executive. So what is happening now is normal, very normal in a situation like this.
So it's not the kind of relationship we should be worried about.
It's not a
harmonious relationship.
It's harmonious relationship in the proper sense. But if you are not an initiate, you will feel that the relationship is too strained, it's too hot.
Okay. So why are some bills yet to be signed?
I think some people misunderstand some of the bills that were passed by the previous administration as being bills which His Excellency President Buhari has withheld assent. When I assumed duty sometime in August last year, one of the first things I did was to go into a relationship with the former clerk to the National Assembly. I said, look, there were bills that were passed that have not been forwarded to Mr. President. Or if they were forwarded, please give me evidence that they were forwarded. The clerk, those bills, the evidence of the forwarding has not been given till today. Now, there were a set of, I think, 46 bills or something, which I moved a motion on the floor of the Senate I think the press said 46 bills or so in 10 minutes. That is for concurrence, what we call the legislative reciprocity, that the House of Representatives has passed these bills, and the Senate did not pass. And the Senate has passed these bills, and the House did not pass. We agreed with the House that, look, pass our bills by way of expedited special procedure, and they passed. And we also passed those bills of the House. Now, those bills, I want the members of the public to be interested whether they have been forwarded to Mr. President. Because up to about 3-4 months ago, when the present clerk resumed, I still have been asking questions. And I've been asking those questions to avoid questions like, to be able to address questions that you have asked. So let the public, or unless a bill is forwarded to Mr. President for assent, you cannot say that assent has been withheld. And whether it were passed under the president, I think those bills were passed, I think, on the 2nd or 3rd of June, 2015. And it is President Buhari that has become president at that time. And the legislature was still the legislature. And so it ought to have been transmitted to the president 30 days after it was passed. But I haven't seen evidence or record, and I have made written requests when issues like this arise, that there should be evidence. And of course, this office is the office that transmits the bills. And if they were transmitted, there would be a record in this office that they were transmitted. So I think that we're still working with the present clerk to the National Assembly to see the process of those bills either transmitted, so that, because the legislators themselves have been asking, where is the status of those bills? And they're asking because some of those bills, if they were transmitted and assent withheld, it would have been communicated back to the legislature that assent has been withheld. If they were assented to, it would have been gazetted as laws of the Federation. And if they were not transmitted, then something is wrong. The only bills that I know that, as the time we are speaking, have been transmitted to Mr. President for assent are about 8 or 9 bills passed by the Senate and House of Representatives on certain aspects. And those bills, I think, were transmitted about the 25th or 26th of October. And the Mr. President's office is still taking the time allowed by law to have a scrutiny of the bills so that as to know the implications of assenting to each of them and the constitutional implications of each of them, and do what the law has assigned him to do before he assents to them. So these are the only bills that are pending, which is just at the time we are speaking, it is not more than 13 or so weeks. It's not up to 10 or more than 13 days after they were transmitted. Yeah, so no other bill is pending. The appropriation bill was assented to, FCT appropriation was assented to, the other bills were assented to.
At this point, I'll tell you to hold it there. We'll take a short break. Viewer, don't go away. The program continues in a moment. Thanks for staying with us. The program is Stepping Up. We're reaching you from the office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly Matters in charge of the Senate, Senator Ita Enang. Now, distinguished Senator, exactly what is your job description? How do you go about your duties?
My job description is to make sure that we maintain a good, harmonious relationship between the executive and the legislature. A liaise between the Mr. President, the presidency, the office, the ministries, departments and agencies, and the legislature, the Senate President, the Deputy President of the Senate, the leadership of the Senate, majority and minority, all the distinguished senators, and a liaise between the ministers and the chairman of committees, a liaise between the chairman of committees and the committees and the respective chief executives of the different ministries in respect of matters that come from them, about them, and concerning them, and that are pending in the legislature. And another of our job is to make sure that any matter, personal or family, affecting a legislator, a senator, that we bring it to the attention of the executive. Every matter affecting, to maintain a cordial relationship between them. Any celebration, any matter, even of an adverse nature affecting a senator, is brought to the attention of the executive, of Mr. President. And Mr. President shows appropriate concern and they just relate with them as a family. The executive and the legislature are one family of many children, but working together for Nigeria. So that is, in brief, my job. I also make sure that when bills are being considered, I draw the attention of the different ministers to the pendency of that bill. And when they're inviting them for meetings, if there is a crisis between a committee and a minister, or a committee chairman and a minister, I intervene and make sure it doesn't get to a louder level. And I make sure I put the minister or the head of that parastatal together with the chairman of the committee and the committee. And sometimes we arrange meetings and consultations in the offices of the chairman or the distinguished senators. And if a senator or a member has a problem affecting a ministry or something that is capable of, or needs something to be done for a constituent, sometimes they go through our office. So our office is like plenipotentiary. It's like omnibus. Our job is to make sure that Mr. President's relationship with the legislators and the legislature is perfect. And when bills, we also act as we transmit on behalf of, as Mr. President communicates, we transmit the communication of Mr. President or the executive. And generally work as the bridge between the executive and the legislature. And of course, if some blow comes, if there is some heat from the executive to the legislature, it lands here. If there is also one from the legislature to the executive, it lands here, so that the heat doesn't actually get at each other. It lands on me, and rebounces because we are the fodder, we are the bridge.
How well would you say you've been playing this role?
I would leave members of the public to judge that, but I know I have, to the best of my ability, done as much as my experience allows. And when it gets, in my opinion, when some wisdom seems to be off, and when I am deficient in wisdom how to handle, I will now say, Lord, the wisdom you gave me has gone far. Take over from here. Mm-hmm. And I always see God taking over, and I find a solution.
Okay, let's talk about the budget process now. There's been a clamor since 1999 for transparency in the budgeting process. How can this be achieved?
This can only be achieved by strict adherence to the provisions of the Constitution. Of recent, I have been speaking on the budget process that the budget we've been passing from 1999 is inchoate. I've been speaking, and I spoke last because I felt so strongly about it, and at the last bar conference, I had to raise it at the bar conference, and it was properly debated. I want to say that the best way for the budget process to be transparent is, first, let the budget as laid on the floor. Let the budget follow the constitutional provision, 1. 2, in the House of Representatives, there is a provision in the standing order that the details of the budget will have to be laid on the floor for every member to see. So before it is passed. That is how to make the budget, to avoid the question of a word I don't like using, that is the kind of conflict that are raised one illegal word in the legislative process. So that's what can be done to make it more transparent. Again, the budget of the agencies will have to be also passed in accordance with the procedure for passing budget. That is, it should be passed by the legislature, not the committees of the legislature. It should be in the votes and proceedings of the legislature, and as transmitted by the President, it should be communicated back to Mr. President for approval before it is, for assent, quote unquote, before it is forwarded to the agencies for use. Because, like I earlier I've read on this program, in the course of this, if we had been having the budgets of each of the agencies properly approved by the legislature, you state what will be done with what amount of money. At the end of the year, you do oversight and see what has been done, what has not been done. At the end of the year, the last agency lays before the legislature what it has done with the previous money before it asks for the last money. All the money we're talking about that was missing, and it is now the job of EFCC to go about it. That ought not to be the job of the EFCC. It ought to be the job of the legislature to have found out first, and the job of the audit. So that is how the budget process can be more perfect and transparent.
Now, recently, the National Assembly turned down a request for external borrowing. What is the implication of this on the economy?
Well, in law, we say it is not dismissed, it is struck out. The legislature is not to pass a measure as submitted by Mr. President or the executive in the case of a state governor. The legislature is to consider, if in the course of consideration, they are to do one of two things. Either say, I reject, if they go to consider it on the merit. But in this case, they did not consider it on the merit. It may have been preliminary issues and preliminary inquiries of what appeared in what we could call prima facie on the face of the application of the request. And so they stood it down or struck it out. Nigerians should not be worried. The executive is liaising and consulting with the leadership of the legislature. It will be represented. It is still pending in the House of Representatives. It may not even be represented if there is an agreement that what was presented here should just be the Senate rules allows it to revisit it by way of a substantive motion to rescind its decision, or they wait for the House of Representatives to pass it and then they concur with it. But either way, the Nigerians should not be worried. because the National Assembly had already approved in this year's budget, 2016, that there will be a borrowing of about 1.8 trillion to fund the budget. So they cannot say, I approve borrowing for you to fund the budget, and then in the end, they don't approve the borrowing. All they are saying is, give us further and better particulars, as we will say in court. So this is being done.
Okay. Just before I let you go, you were a legislator in Akwa Ibom State Assembly.
Yes.
You were equally a federal legislator, both in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now, as an insider, in what areas should the National Assembly place premium that will impact much on the people?
Well, let me complete that for you. I was, first of all, a councillor in my local government council.
Wow.
So I started as a councillor. Then I became a member of the State House of Assembly in Akwa Ibom State. Councillor in Ita local government as it then was. Then after House of Assembly, I became a member of the House of Representatives from 1999 to 2011. Then Senate 2011 and 2016. So I have gone through from the lowest rung to the highest rung of the legislature. Now, what impact, what should the legislature do? The legislature should take advantage of the grace of God that it has. This is the longest lasting legislature. And each executive, head of the executive, has different approach to governance. It should be able to align with the different approach and develop itself and its capacity. It should know that the most important is to know that there are for lawmaking, because it does appear that there is some concept outside which is different from lawmaking. The legislature should know that it is the first and the most prime arm of government under the Constitution. I delivered a lecture at the inauguration of the present assembly, and I said, and at that time I wasn't in this appointment, that the legislature is the prime arm of government. It's number one listed in the executive. Their job is for lawmaking. You make laws for the executive to legislate. And you are expected to be at a highest level of intellectual composure. I also urge, and I still urge the legislature, to see itself as a very cerebral body, because it is the laws you make that the Supreme Court will interpret, that the Court of Appeal should interpret, that the Federal High Court should interpret. The legislature should consider that it is a cerebral, highly intellectual body, that the laws it makes should be challenging, and it should have good record, so that in the course of interpreting the laws, the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal should be able to say, look, what was the intention of the legislature? If they don't find it in the votes and proceedings, they could go and find it in the Hansard, which is the intellectual submissions made by the legislators, so as to give flesh to what were your intentments.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming on Stepping Up. I'm sure we'll have to come back again, because there's so many areas we've not been able to touch. Thank you, viewer, for staying tuned to the program. Thank you, distinguished Senator.
Thank you very much. And Nigeria is stepping up as just as this program is stepping up.
Don't forget to send your questions and comments to the various platforms scrolling on your screens. And remember, it's SMS only, please. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.